Now that Who's month has come and gone, it's time now for something fresh and not so Japanese. I'm not sure how many of you are in school or have graduated already, but I can say for sure that as someone that's already graduated with a bachelor's and everything, and doesn't have a comfy full-time job, as promised by the American dream, life can lead you wandering. It can destroy your previously thought notions of how life is supposed to be on top of all the new ideas and perspectives you learn after high school and into college and whatnot. Today's film is kind of about that process, but it also stars Jerry Seinfeld as a honeybee. Yeah, it's that movie. Memes aside, considering they're all dead by now, does B-Movie have anything to say about entering the workforce? Does it have any thoughts about corporatism? B culture? I don't know. But ultimately, so before we start this, I'll go ahead and say DreamWorks has a very hit and miss track record with me. I mean, you have knockouts like Prince of Egypt, Megamind, and Kung Fu Panda. Oh, and that other meme movie. But then you have their not so great films like Shark Tale and Turbo, the snail that's very fast. And that's the whole movie. And they made a series out of this on Netflix. Whatever. I'm not sure where B-Movie sits because I don't know how to feel about it really. So, you have a story about a honeybee who is excited about the workforce. He wants to get Ryan to working and right out of college, but he also finds out that his current hive gives each bee one job their entire life, apparently. And it's all odd jobs and nothing too exciting. Realistically, they wouldn't require any college education, but that just shows you how much I know about bee college. Barry goes off on a journey outside the hive, and then it kind of goes into a lot of directions from there. Well, not a whole lot, just multiple. And not all of them congeal with one another, I think. I think there are two different scripts here that they had, and they didn't know which one to pick, so they just sort of mashed them together. You have story A of Barry Seinfeld. I know it's Barry B. Benson, but I really can't hear anything but Seinfeld coming from this character's mouth. You have him escaping the hive to find his purpose in life or something. And then you have story B of a bee who is suing the human race for stealing all the honey from the honeybees with no royalties or whatnot. Both of these sound alright on their own, but put together, kind of a mess. There's different themes and metaphors you can apply to both of these stories, but run them together and I'm not sure if they entirely work. More on that later, because another problem I have was that the worker bee metaphor very much misunderstood in this movie. You know the movie Ants in Bug's Life, right? Well, apparently Seinfeld did as well, and was inspired to do his own take, but with bees instead. But the thing is, the bee culture and structure and anthropomorphization in this film is more like ant culture, and that's noticeably different. It's also not that hard to figure out or research either. All of the bees in real life that collect honey and pollen, those are all female, as is their queen, and the male drones stand by inside the hive solely to reproduce with the queen and kind of protect the babies and whatnot. In this movie, the only female characters are Barry's mom and a couple of humans. Those are the only notable ones. Now, I know there are such things as artistic liberties, and they are used in movies all the time, but you really do need to get your source material right before equating human behavior or phenomena to something in nature, i.e. a bee colony. Otherwise, you just kind of look like a dummy. Not saying the makers of this film are dummies, but there is a distinct lack of logic to their approach. Let's jump off the script and look at what are these character models even. Now, there are other DreamWorks properties with better models for humans, like Shrek, but for some reason, they kind of went with the more cartoony look with their design, and it's too cartoony for my taste. It's too goofy to really look at and go, yeah, that's a human. Now the bees and the other insects, they look okay, but not the purely human characters. They either look okay or just straight up butt ugly, and not in a very good way. Like, I'm sure they weren't intentionally trying to make them as ugly as possible, but they achieved that very well. Now, I also don't have a problem with the animation or backgrounds. There are little small moments where I was actually impressed with certain texture or the shot that was going on. Like, look at this close-up of a tennis ball. It's very much high quality, and I hope they didn't spend too much of their budget on that attention to detail. They probably could have used it towards another aspect of the film, just saying. Now, normally films will have scenes where the characters are flying and it's all shot like you're actually in the moment and flying with them. And in this movie, it feels a little bit too video game-like. But other times, they actually achieve the right amount of speed and motion. And there are times where I would have liked a bit more scene variety. There are certain places where you just have shot, reverse shot, back to shot, and that's pretty disappointing to me considering this is animation where literally anything is possible with enough direction and computing power, so it just kind of feels lazy, but overall nothing too much to complain about. Now, as for music, I've heard some industry pros say that if no one notices or even thinks about your music or sound design, then either you've done a perfect job or you're just not doing good enough. And basically, B-Movie doesn't really have anything outstanding in terms of soundtrack or orchestral score. Surprisingly, there were only 2 licensed tracks, plus one sort of tacked on ending thing.
Start thinking bee. Can I wait and see?
Be a busy little bee, not a teasy little bee.
One of the things I did notice is that the mixing for voice acting and music and all that, the little balance there of the 3 main components, a little bit inconsistent to me. This might just be my ears, but see if you can tell in this little clip here.
Also, I got a couple of reports of root beer being poured on us. Murphy's in a home because of it, just babbling like a cicada.
That's awful.
It might just be my inner audio engineer picking up on imperfections, or it could just be how my mind works with minor details, but enough about that. It's now time for spoilers. Pause the video and go to this time if you're worried about spoilers. I would actually invite you to go ahead and send some donations or good words about the people of Houston, Texas, who are still currently affected by the floods that were caused by Hurricane Harvey. Now, the romance between Barry and Vanessa feels unnecessary. I don't even know if it's there. They just sort of accuse Barry and Vanessa of being a couple, as is the bee law that you cannot talk to humans even. And it could have been more effective if the queen or bee higher-ups in the human honey industry were connected or working together in some way, like you would in an actual bureaucracy. But now it just kind of seems pointless. Outside of possible imminent danger, I don't see how it's that huge of a deal, although that could just be the joke. It's not like in Stormy Night where their relationship was the major stake or main conflict. This is just another consequence of smashing 2 script ideas together like a round peg into a square hole. I think I was actually shocked when the movie described it as romance, like in a serious manner. I'm not saying they should have been swapping spit on screen. This is a family-friendly movie, and DreamWorks doesn't want to drive away their audience that bad. But it's so underdeveloped and ultimately pointless to the overall movie that I'd hardly call it a relationship in the first place. Also, if you didn't know, Patrick Warburton's character Ted is Vanessa's boyfriend, which is strange since they show 0 romance or chemistry at all. I kind of had the feeling that this is just some BS romantic subplot that was put here just because the filmmakers decided that they absolutely needed a romantic subplot, but had no idea how to write one. That's just my only guess. Switching gears, the suing the humans plot ultimately results in all the bees getting back so much honey to their one hive in Manhattan. It could be all the hives everywhere, but we never see that, and it's hard to tell whether that's implied or not. It makes them into lazy bums that do nothing productive all day. There could be an argument here, whether you prefer capitalism, socialism, or whatever, but fair enough, you can have that debate. But then all the plants everywhere basically die. It's all gray, all wilted. They say it in the film that all the plants and flowers on Earth are just wilted, friggin' wilted. Does that include algae? Pretty sure if all the algae was gone, plus every plant everywhere, then it wouldn't be just the plants that would wilt and die. That's kind of how nature works. We need the oxygen that they give off as much as they need the carbon dioxide that we spew out from our mouth holes. But at worst, in the movie, all the flower shops close. I don't think you've considered all the consequences of floral genocide, Jerry Seinfeld. I could also bring up how bees aren't the only pollinating species in the world, but I think you get my point. Okay, spoilers are over. Overall, while this film is somewhat entertaining and chuckle-worthy in some places, pretty much a hot mess in others. When Seinfeld isn't trying to out-Seinfeld himself, or whenever Warburton is on screen basically, then I got a couple of laughs, but then you have this, I hate to say it, atrocious script trying to piece everything together, plus a very gross understanding of bees that could have been proved or double-checked through the top results of Google, which was around when this film came out. Don't take the bee stuff too seriously, and you might have an okay-ish kids movie, minus a few very blatant adult jokes. Like, I think DreamWorks just basically told them, yeah, there aren't enough edgy adult jokes in here. Just go ahead and sprinkle a couple more in there.
How did all these bees get here? Do you know you're in a fake hive with fake walls?
Our queen was moved here. We had no choice.
This is your queen? That's a man in woman's clothes. That's a drag queen.
But now comes the more important question. How furry is it? Let's take it through my chance system, a handy rubric I use to break down several aspects of furriness, those being cast, harmony, anthropocentrism, narrative, commonality, and expression. Let's look at cast, or how many story-relevant characters there are that are furry. This movie seems to spend quite a bit of its time between the humans and the non-human characters, as they interact with Barry, that is. 90% of this is from his perspective, with the other being the title sequence, end credits. That's basically it. So you have Vanessa, you have Ken, you have the, I think, Southern corrupt lawyer, Montgomery. You have Barry's parents, you have Chris Rock as a mosquito, you have Barry's bee colleague, and of course Barry himself. I'd call that a good half and half between humans and non-humans, so let's give this a 2 out of 4. Now for harmony, or how natural anthros and furries are to the setting. These are bees in a Manhattan park, so the only unnatural thing about them is that they have the ability to communicate effectively with humans, which is a stark and very surprising fact within this movie's setting. And while they're obviously also anthropomorphized, that doesn't stop any human character from recognizing that they are anything but bees. But I don't know if I can call this a perfect 4, though. Maybe somewhere between a 3 and a 4, let's call it 3.5. Moving on to anthropocentrism, or how close these furries are to being human. Outside of stinging people and collecting pollen and all that, these bees basically live and act like people do. It's still slightly different, like how they shorten the amount of time these bees go through in terms of school plus college. Now for a person, that's an average of, let's say, 17 to 18 years worth of school. The movie shrinks that down to 9 days for bees. Okay, let's do some math. If honeybees live up to 5 years, I checked, and the average human is about 80 for a lifespan, I think the ratio is off there. And there are other small details like using their antenna as cell phones and having swimming pools of honey, which seems a little counterintuitive since they feed off of honey, I think. I'll call it a perfect 4 though. As for narrative, or how key these furries' animal nature is to the narrative, I mean, it's pretty much the backbone of both plots going on in this film. The ones that were basically stitched together like a Doberman hind leg on a Yorkshire's body. Again, while wholly inaccurate to bees, this look at postgraduate job seeking and general ennui of it all, mixed with species-related legal troubles, shows a narrative key on the fact that these are anthropomorphic bees. 4 out of 4. And next we have commonality, or how prevalent furries or anthros are outside of the main cast. Not only do other insect and arachnid species exist outside of the colony, although in passing mention, they're also as anthropomorphic as Barry and the Honey Bunch. And there's also this random cow that shows up near the end, but I won't talk too much about that, since she raises more questions about humans' recognition of anthropomorphic animals in this film than I'm sure this movie thought of, and by that I mean it's just a quick gag. I guess I'd consider them common in this movie, since there is more attention being paid to the humans and the bees than any other species, but not a majority, so a 2 out of 4. Finally, we have expression, or how furry they actually look. So here's a question. Would it have looked too weird to give the bee an extra pair of limbs in this movie? So they are insects after all, meaning 6 legs in total. So you have possibly 2 for arms and 4 for legs, or vice versa. But here, there are just 2 arms and 2 legs, just like a person, or humanoid. And that just seems odd to me. And it brings this down to around a 1 or 2 in expression, because they're not really that bee-like, or close to their original animal nature in terms of appearance. I can't really call them human though, since they have this yellow skin and other minor features pertinent to bees, like the stinger and the antenna. But again, they're not really all that bee-like or insectoid. This is like somewhere between a 1 and 2, so let's call it a 1.5. After a quick tally of the score, we have a total of 17 out of a possible 24. Surprisingly, this is the first time I've had to use decibels in the Furry Quality Index scores, but I will limit myself to only half, like halfway between 2 numbers. Anything other than that, and it'll just get confusing. Now overall, it has a pretty decent score for furriness, but I can't say that I enjoyed it in terms of entertainment. I think I amused myself more picking apart how inaccurate it represents bees and even beekeeping than actually watching the film, and pretty sure the movie is a stale meme at the time.
Hey, look at me, I'm wearing a chapstick hat. This is pathetic.
I've got issues! Well. A royal flush.
You're bluffing.
Am I?
So either watch it for the oddity that it is, or skip it and watch Ants, the better film about anthropomorphic insects in my opinion. Suffice to say, not one of my favorites, but maybe you can find some enjoyment in it, especially if you can appreciate Jerry Seinfeld-esque humor. This has been Gregor, do you like jazz? Reindeer, with How Furry Is It? Stick around for more anthro analysis and antler antics.